Everybody, we are going live. We are doing chapter 3. Let me push that button here. Okay. Here we go. All right. This is Finding Your Why. We're on chapter 3. We're doing chapter 3. And Finding Your Why by Simon Sinek. Today is January 3rd, 2018. Chapter 3, Why Discover for Individuals. We're on chapter 3, which is page 40. Alright. This section is for any individual who wants to learn their personal why. Whether you're an entrepreneur, work at a company, or student, or stay-at-home parent, the process is the same. If you want to find the why of a team or a group, head over to the next chapter, which explains the tribe approach. Like most things, the why discovery process is most efficient and effective when you're fully prepared. See the diagrams below to get an understanding of the process that you will be going through. Next, we'll walk through these 7 steps one by one. Find your partner. Remember to find your why. You need to pan for gold in the river of your past, recalling stories of your life and career from which your significant themes can emerge. Only you can retrieve those stories from the memory, but when it comes to interpreting them, a second set of eyes and ears, a partner, is invaluable. Listening to your stories, your partner can offer a perspective that is nearly impossible to see for yourself. Finding the right partner is an important part of the process. That doesn't mean you must find a trained psychologist or coach, just someone who generally wants to help you find your why. The partner section on page 43 will teach them how to do the rest. The role of the partner will be to take notes as you share your stories and ask questions that will help you find deeper meaning and significance in them. The partner is there to help identify the golden thread, the recurring themes and ideas that are basis for your why. You don't have to know your partner well, but we recommend that it's someone with whom you feel comfortable sharing personal information and feelings. Though counterintuitive, we don't recommend selecting a partner who knows you too well. In our experience, spouses, close relatives, and best friends have a hard time being objective. You don't want someone who may be tempted to either tell your story for you or correct ones that you tell. The best partners will be hearing your stories for the first time. The best partners are innately curious, which makes them great at listening and great at asking follow-up questions. Someone tries to get to know you a little better will almost always ask more probably unexpected and thoughtful questions than someone who thinks they already know everything about you. Someone who will listen and take notes as you recall your stories. Again, there are someone who generally wants to help you discover your why. Get your partner up to speed. Once the person you've chosen has accepted your invitation to help, we highly recommend that you start by showing them Simon's talk so they can understand the basic concept of the golden circle. To support your partner, we've included the video and the content from the partner selection below online. Have your partner read this section before you get started so they can prepare their role and response. Partner section. Welcome. Thank you for agreeing to help someone discover and begin to articulate their why, the purpose, cause, or belief that drives them. For us, Peter and David, helping someone find their why is one of the most inspiring things we do in our jobs. We love the opportunity to partner with someone and see them light up when they are finally able to put their why into terms. Even though we've done hundreds of these, it's always inspiring. Now you get to be partnered. We'd be lying if we said we weren't a little jealous. So have fun and enjoy the gift you're about to give someone. At the end of your time together, the goal is to have a draft version of their why statement in hand. They will serve as a filter for the decisions they make so they can find as much joy and fulfillment in their work and career as possible. This section is designed to give you the tips and tools you need to support them. Don't worry, you don't need to be a therapist or coach to be a great partner. You just need to have a desire to help your companion find their why. We'll be here to guide you step by step through the process. In Appendix 2 of this book on page 227, we've also included a summary of all the tips and questions you'll need so that you don't have to refer back to the chapter during the why discovery process. At its core, the why is an origin story. Who we are is the sum total of all the experience we've had growing up, the lessons we've learned, the teachers we had, and the things we did. In order to help our companion discover their why, you'll need to listen to the stories from their past. Their why represents who they are at their natural best and will be revealed through specific stories and experiences that affect their life and shape who they are. Your role. Your main role is to listen to the stories, then ask thoughtful questions that will help them dig deeper to find the underlying meaning of each memory. As you listen, you'll take notes, identifying themes, ideas, words, or phrases that recur in the stories. These themes will weave together into gold thread to define who they are in their natural best. During this process, it's essential that you put aside your own biases. Don't allow what you know about the person or even what you think you may know to cloud your objectivity. What's most important is that you be fully present, meaning you will avoid distractions and stay completely focused on the task at hand. The why discovery process is not a therapy session or a mentoring moment. It's not a time for you to offer your opinion or advice or to solve problems. Your job is to be an active listener. How to be an active listener. Active listening is about hearing more than the words that are said. It's about understanding the meaning, motivation, or emotion behind those words. Some of the techniques of active listening are simple. Make eye contact, acknowledge verbal and nonverbal what the other person says, e.g., offer affirmations like go on or nod your head as you understand things. Invite them to say more about what happened or how they feel about it. Pay particular attention to nonverbal cues, facial expressions, body language, and even long pauses. All serve as clues to how the story makes them feel. The stories you will hear are some of the most meaningful of their life, and they may evoke strong feelings, pride, love, fulfillment, fear, belonging, loneliness. All these and more might show up in different ways. Some people get more animated as their hands more, sit on the edge of their seats, raise their voice. Others may get choked up or become soft-spoken and reflective. You won't be able to write down everything they say. However, be sure to take notes on what they are saying when you see a visual or emotional cue. These may be important details as you start to find the common thread later on. How to dig deeper. How to dig deeper. We often find that people begin their stories with straightforward facts. What happened, when it happened, and who was there. It's what we naturally do when we tell stories. While these details are important to set context to what will be shared, next, they won't help you get to the why, because the why is connected to feelings. Sharing feelings is a very important part of the process. The goal is to help them express the feeling and emotions they felt at the time. It's really hard to connect with a feeling when we speak in generalities. We can't stress enough that the stories your companion shares need to be very specific. For example, they might at first say, I used to visit my grandparents every summer during school break. It was a lot of fun. As a partner, you won't get much juice from that. You want the person to connect with a specific summer, specific event, or interaction. If the first pass of the story is unemotional, try digging deeper with something like, of all the summers you spent with your grandparents, tell me about the one that stands out the most. The goal is that they actually get specific, which might sound something like, I remember the summer when I was 13. I just had my birthday, and I was officially a teenager. I felt really grown up and wanted to do grown-up things. I remember working in the yard with my grandpa. He let me use the lawnmower, and I felt like he trusted me with something important. It gave me a sense of confidence. There's a lot more to explore in that version of the story. Partner tip. If you notice that your companion starts speaking in generalities or responds with general story when you're asked for something specific, don't let them off the hook just to be nice. It will make it more difficult to find their why and much more difficult to tie their themes back to their stories, which is really important. Remember, the why is not who we are aspired to be. It's who we truly are. The stories are tangible, proof of who they truly are. If they tell you right off the bat how the experience made them feel, don't take what they say at face value. Ask clarifying questions. Often the expression of feeling indicate an underlying and significant lesson or particular relationship that embodies who they truly are today. If emotions are the proverbial smoke, the underlying meaning is the fire, and where there is smoke, there is fire. It's your job to ask the following questions until you uncover the reasons. This specific story is significant. Here are a few questions that may come in handy. You can find the summary, all the tips and questions in Appendix 2 on page 227. How did it make you feel? Bullet point, how did it make you feel? Bullet point, what is it about this experience that you absolutely loved? Bullet point, you've probably felt this same feeling before. What is it about this story that makes it special? E.j., if they say they felt proud, you can ask them what about the pride was different from other times they felt it. Bullet point, how did this experience affect you and who you become? Bullet point, what was the lessons from that experience that you still carry with you today? Bullet point, of all the stories you could have shared with me, what makes this specific one so special that you chose to tell it? Bullet point, if someone else features prominently in the story, ask them how that person made a difference in their lives or what they loved or admired about the person. You'll know you're getting somewhere when they begin talking less about what happened and more about how they felt about what happened. It might sound something like, it just really filled me up to be part of it, or it was pretty disappointing to know that I let my parents down. Statements like these are where you want to start digging. For example, what do they mean by filled up or disappointed? You may assume you know, but their definition may be different from yours. So ask a question that will elicit more specifics, such as, bullet point, tell me what you meant when you said, it really filled me up. Bullet point, you probably felt disappointed before. Describe how this particular feeling of disappointment was so different that it still comes to mind all these years later. You may hear stories that are not particularly warm or happy. That's normal. There is lots to learn about someone from their positive and negative experience. Your job as the partner is to help see the lessons or even the silver linings in those difficult moments too. For example, we did a why discovery with someone who, when asked about a happy experience from her childhood, replied that she had a horrible childhood. She then went on to recount stories of an extremely physical or abusive father. When we heard, however, was that in every story she always mentioned how she protected her sister from her father. She never realized that pattern existed. As soon as we pointed out the silver lining, the positive glimmer in such a dark experience, she immediately started crying. She is who she is today because she's learned to protect those who could not protect themselves. Happy memories and sad memories, tales of opportunity and hardship, all offer a chance to learn about who someone is and how they became who they are. All roads lead to why. The better you capture the theme of how they felt, the easier it will be to put together the why statement that feels really authentic to them. In addition to the reoccurring theme that you'll listen in each story, there are two other main components to look for: contribution and impact. These are the building blocks of the final why statement. The contribution the person makes to the lives of others, and the impact of the contribution over time. Rewrite it in this format. So that. The contribution is the first blank, and the impact is the second blank. For example, Simon Sinek, the author of Start With Why, expresses his own why in these words: to inspire people to do the things that inspire them so that, together, we can change our world. Simon's contributions is what he actively does for others, seeking to inspire them. And the impact is what happens when the contribution is made. A lot of people working together to change our world. With that in mind, do what you can to find out what other companion is giving someone else or receiving in each story. The contribution, and what difference it may have made to them or others. The impact. You'll begin to see a pattern that will help you understand the contribution and impact of their why. There is almost always some sort of emotional cue, verbal or nonverbal, when they touch on one or both of these themes. Some tips for asking great questions. Ask open-ended questions. The best questions are those that can be answered with a yes or a no. They require the person to give more information. Often in our workshop, we hear people ask questions like, "That made you angry, didn't it?" This question is unhelpful for 3 reasons. It can be answered with yes or no. It assumes you know how the person responds, and it leads the witness. They may agree with you, though they may have an answer differently. If left to answer an open-ended question without your help, remember this process relies on getting to the heart of who they are, not who you think they are. Instead of leading the witness, try something like, "Help me understand how that made you feel." Avoid questions that start with why. This may sound contradictory since you are doing a why discovery, but there is a problem with questions that start with why. Ironically, they are actually harder to answer. Why does that story matter to you, for example, triggers the part of your brain that is not responsible for language. It's easier to answer a question that starts with what, for example. What is it about that story that really matters to you? It's basically the same question, but framed in a way that is easier for someone to answer. It answers the why. Questions by allowing the person to talk more specifically about the components of the story that were meaningful. Try both. You'll see what we mean in practice. Bullet point. Sit in silence. If you ask a question and feel they are struggling to answer, let them struggle. Though your inclination may be to help fill in the silence, don't. Resist the temptation to fill the silence with another question or a suggested answer. Instead, just wait. Emotions are difficult to articulate, and it may take the person a little time to formulate the right words. Sometimes silence is the best tool you have to get them to tell you more. Master it. How to take notes. P.S. This is the last section. You're almost done. Surprisingly enough, the format you use to jot down your notes can be really helpful when it comes to help your companion tie everything together. You can take notes. However, of course, you found the format especially useful, maybe you will too. Draw a vertical line from the top of your note page to the bottom. An example has been included for you in the appendix on the left side of the line. Jot down the factual details of the story. College graduation. On the right side, focus on their feelings, emotion, or interpretations of the meaning of the story. Cared that he made his grandfather proud. On the right side, you can also write down any words, phrases, verbal or nonverbal cues that come up more than once. Separating your notes in this way makes it easier to review them at the end and identify the elements that are most important to the why discovery process. Hint, all the essential stuff will be in the right-hand column. As you take notes on multiple stories, you'll begin to notice which theme, words, phrases, or ideas recur most often. Underline, circle, highlight, or put a check mark next to each of these phrases. This can help you quickly identify the themes that will lead to the why later on. Also, for each story, write contributions and or impact in the right-hand column to remind you not to move on to the next story until you are clear on what they gave or received, the contribution, and what effect it had on them and others, the impact. We've given you a lot of details that we hope will help you be the best partner possible. Remember, this really matters to companions, and they ask you to help them. That's an honor. What matters most is that you show up with a genuine curiosity as well as a desire to help the person you're working with. Who knows, maybe when it's over, you'll be inspired to look for your own why. Pick a time and place. How about the Starbucks that's equidistant between your office and your partners? Definitely not. You're about to have an intimate conversation. Noise and distractions will only make it more difficult, even if there is smoked butterscotch frappuccino to be had. Plus, you'll be exposing a lot of personal information. Why do it in a spot where all these people pretending to work on their screenplays can overhear you? Choose a place where you can concentrate and where you feel free to share personal stories out loud. While a phone call or video conference with your partner can work, we strongly suggest you meet in person. That way it's easier for your partner to pick up on body language, not just facial expressions, and other visual cues that are only available when you're in the same room. If you do have to work remotely, settle down in a quiet, distraction-free location and encourage your partner to do the same. And set aside enough time, at least 3 hours. Yes, that's a big commitment. But there is no shortcut to discovering your why. Think of it as working out. The more time you put into it, the more you get out of it. It's not the kind of thing you can race through. As you learn in Chapter 2, there are 3 steps to discovering your why. Tell stories, identify themes, draft the why statement. It works best when you complete all 3 steps in one sitting. If you stop after 2 or 3 stories, for example, and try to resume a few days later, you'll have to get into storytelling mode all over again. In fact, we highly recommend that you work through all 3 steps without interruption, except for a few breaks and leg stretches, of course. Identifying themes right after telling your story is much easier than trying to come back to the task later. Similarly, drafting your why statement will be easier when reoccurring themes and patterns that emerge from the stories are fresh in your mind. Turn off your phones, remove any distractions, and enjoy the process. Gather your stories. Before meeting with your partner, you need to do a little prep work. Your why is born from your past experiences. It is the sum total of lessons you learned, the experience you had, and the values you adopt while growing up. You're looking for stories that bring to light who you are at your natural best. As you recall stories that fit the bill, jot down notes on each so you can quickly recall them when you sit down with your partner. Here are a few guidelines for gathering the type of stories that will lead you to your why. Bullet point. Think of specific experiences and people in your life that have really shaped who you are today. You may choose an event that was obviously important, such as the day you came up with the idea of your company, or an event that's less obvious, like defining moments you had with your old boss. If your event meant something to you, helped you become who you are, taught you something, or made you proud, write it down. As you think of the people who have been the most influential in your life, try to recall specifics about what they said or did that made such a difference to you. Since your why comes from your past, which is the period from your birth until yesterday, you can draw your stories from any time in between those marks. The memories may come from school, home, or work, or any other areas of your life. You may recall times or even events that you would gladly revisit. Or you may retrieve memories of painful episodes that you would never want to relive. What both kinds of experience have in common is that, good or bad, they help make you who you are. Our struggles are the short-term steps we must take on our way to long-term success. Let me say that again. Our struggles are the short-term steps we must take on our way to long-term success. The goal of the story gathering exercise is to end up with at least 5 stories that you consider the most impactful of your life. The more stories you have, the easier it will be for your partner to detect the patterns and themes that will lead to your why. Remember that each story must be about a specific time, place, or moment. The more specific you are, the more you'll feel an emotional connection to the memory. And it's this emotional connection that will lead to your why. Write down your stories as they come to you. As you begin, keep in mind that all roads will eventually lead to why. So don't overthink this process. You may list your stories chronologically or at random. Don't worry about writing down all the details. A simple line or 2 for each is sufficient. The goal is simply to have a starting point for sharing the stories with your partner. When you share your stories with your partner, you can include all the particulars and explore any additional memories that may pop up. Here are a couple story gathering methods we found helpful. You can use both or neither. Method 1, peaks and valleys. High school graduation, first job, trip to the vet, got married, promotion, birth of sons, MBA. Last semester NSU, father's death, acquisition. Draw a horizontal line across the middle of the piece of paper. Stories you put above the line are those you consider happy memories. Moments you'd enthusiastically relive. Stories below lines are events that you wouldn't necessarily want to relive, but that impact your life and shape who you are today. Write a few words to encapsulate each story as you fill it out the chart. The higher you plot the stories above the line, the more fulfilling and positive they were. The lower you plot the stories below the line, the more challenging or difficult they were. You'll probably end up with stories at various levels. When it comes time to choose the stories, you'll tell your partner, choose the highest of the highs and the lowest of lows. These are the stories that carry the most emotional and therefore the ones that will most clearly lead your why. You probably won't share all your stories you've noted on the page. In fact, you may share share other stories that you think spontaneously when you're with your partner. It's all good. The exercise is just a starting point to get the juices flowing. Method 2, the memory prompt. If you have a hard time picking stories out of thin air, this method may be for you. Just read the prompts below and see what memories they spark. Don't worry about writing down all the details. Just write a line or two on a piece of paper to jog your memory when it comes time to share with your partner. Who in your life has helped make you the person you are today? Coach, mentor, teacher, family member. Write down a specific time when they exemplified what you admire most about them, whether they interacting with you or with someone else. How did hearing the words or watching their actions make you feel? Who else helped shape you? Who else helped shape who you are today? Repeat as many times as you like. Think of a day at work when, as you headed home, you might have said to yourself, I would have done that for free. What happened that day to make you say that? Bullet point 2. Think of your worst day at work. The kind of day you hope never to go through again. What happened? Bullet point 3. What is the earliest specific happy childhood memory that comes to your mind? Bullet point 4. At school, what was an experience you loved? Bullet point 5. What has been a pivotal moment in your life? One when you realized nothing would ever be the same. Bullet point 6. What happened that changed the way you think about the world and your role in it? 1.7. What was a time when you gave yourself to help someone else, after which you felt unbelievably good, like you had done something that mattered? Bullet point 8. What have you accomplished that you're really proud of? Be sure to make a mental note of who else was involved. For example, who helped you? Who cheered on? Who was waiting for you at the finish line? Once you have your chart or list of stories in hand, you're ready to share them with your partner. Just a word of caution. Again, don't overanalyze your selection of stories before you meet with your partner. One of the main reasons you work with a partner is to have someone who can find meaning you can't see in other objectives. Open-minded insight. If you come to the storytelling part of your why, discover with preconceived ideas about how your memories fit together. You risk telling them in a way that proves your theory. Relax. Let your partner identify the themes. You are the storyteller. Your partner is the interpreter. Sharing tip. One little trick that can help the process is to circle the 3 most impactful stories you have and tell those to the partner first. By focusing on the most impactful ones, you will avoid the temptation to tell stories that just seem to tie together. It's the little things that count. David conducted a why discovery workshop with someone named Todd. The following is a story Todd told David. It's the kind of story you might tell. Many people think they have to tell big stories of major events to find their why. What's nice about this example is that although it seems like a relatively small story in the scheme of things, David was able to use this story to assist with finding the golden thread that helped Todd articulate his why. Prior to the story, Todd shared other details about his life. How he went to college on a full basketball scholarship, but ended up losing it due to drug and alcohol addiction. He had aspired to make it to the NBA, so this more than ended his college career. It also shattered his dreams and his self-identity. He was working at a bar, still battling drug addiction and alcoholism, and contemplating suicide at the time that this story took place. Todd, I had gotten off work and was driving up a winding road on my way home one Sunday morning. I passed a little girl selling lemonade outside her house. On any other day, I would have driven past. For some reason, on this day, I had an explicit urge to turn around and give her all my change. I pulled my car up to her lemonade stand and asked, how much for a cup of lemonade? 25 cents. She told me. So I said I would take some. She walked back to the stand to get me a cup of lemonade. And while she was doing that, I scooped out all the quarters I had in the cup holder in my car. They had been piling up from all the tips I get at work. I probably had close to $40 in there. The girl handed me the cup of lemonade, and I put a fistful of quarters into her little palms, and then another scoop, and then another. Each time I watched her eyes light up. She turned and ran into the house full of excitement. I drove away feeling good, as you might expect. But then something happened that I didn't expect. I suddenly became overwhelmed with emotion. I started crying unconditionally. I was crying so much I had to pull my car over. It was amazing. David, wow, that sounded intense. I'm sure you've done things in the past that made you cry. Of all the stories you could have shared with me, what specifically is it about this one that made you choose to share it? Todd, it was the first time in my life that I felt that I had done something for someone else. It was the first time in my life I hadn't put myself first. This was a huge wake-up call for me. It lit my soul on fire, and for the first time I felt like I mattered. I wanted so much to help others feel like they mattered too. I wanted to help others feel they could do and be more. From that moment on, I wanted to share with the world what I had felt. By the end of the why discovery, David found a thread of service that ran through many of Todd's most significant stories. As he did with the little girl selling lemonade, Todd's why is to ignite people's imaginations about what's possible so they can find the motivation to do more with their lives. What's magical about Todd's why is that is exactly what happened to him. His imagination was ignited and was motivated to do more with his life. Share your stories. This is where your partner comes in. Your preparation is complete. Now it's time to sit down with your partner and find your why. It can feel uncomfortable to share this much about yourself, but you don't have to abandon your comfort zone entirely. We just want you to push the boundaries a bit. If some stories are just too personal to reveal, then don't tell them. But for the ones you do choose to share, know that the more you open up, the easier it will be for your partner to see the significant patterns. Share only the stories you feel right about sharing. But when you do share, allow yourself to be vulnerable enough for the process to work. You may surprise yourself with how open you can be as the process unfolds. Specificity is the key to process. Specificity, I can't even say that, I'm reading too much, is the key to process. We can't emphasize this enough. When you made your list or chart of stories, we told you not to worry about the details. Now it's time to dig in. Tell your stories in as much detail as you can. Keep in mind that by details, we don't mean the temperature on a given day or the outfit you were wearing, unless those were particularly significant details to the story. While this kind of information can provide context, the information we're really interested in goes far beneath the surface. Since feelings are at the heart of your why, it is vital that you connect versatility to your memories and the emotions you experience at the time. Specific stories will allow you to do this in a way that general statements won't. The following are some examples. General statement. We used to go to my grandparents' house every year for Christmas. It felt so good to be surrounded by loving family. A specific story. We used to go to my grandmother's house every year for Christmas. The year that really sticks out in my mind is when I was 9 years old. That was the last Christmas my grandfather was alive. He was a powerful force in my life, and I'm not sure I realized how powerful until he was gone. I had a great relationship with him, but only now do I see how he rubbed off on me. He was a crazy, eccentric character who marched to the beat of his own drum. People called him strange or odd, but he always seemed perfectly normal to me. I remember sitting with him on the couch, just him and me. I was also an odd kid. People called me weird at school, but with him I felt safe. With him I felt proud to be me, proud to be different. Thinking he was the coolest person ever gave me the confidence to be my weirdest self. If he was odd and that amazing, well, heck, I'd better get comfortable being who I am if I want to have the same impact on my kids or grandkids one day. General statement. When I was a kid, I really loved gymnastics. I practiced every day for 4 hours. It was challenging, but I got a lot out of it. Specific story. When I was a kid, I really loved gymnastics. Practices were long and intense. I remember one day my team and I were working on some tumbling with my most demanding coach. This guy was really tough to please. He was so hard on me, I never felt good enough for this guy. Sometimes I felt he had it out for me, that he was harder on me than the others. No matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. Tumbling, especially aerial, worked like twisting, flips, wasn't my strong suit, but I kept at it because I was determined to prove to this guy that I was good enough. And then it happened. I remembered it like it was yesterday. I remembered after one run I took, my coach kneeled down next to me and said to the rest of the team, "That's how it should be done." I never felt prouder. I realized at that point he was harder on me not because he didn't like me, but because he believed in me. He pushed me because he knew I had the work ethic, and he knew I had it in me. Instead of telling me, he wanted me to learn that I had it in me. I realized at the moment that discipline and hard work, which were ingrained in me at home, were really important. I think that's when I really learned about grit. I still get chills thinking about that day. General statement. I love my job. I travel to a lot of great places and some not so glamorous ones too. What's pretty consistent though is that I'm always meeting interesting and inspiring people. The pay isn't bad either. Specific story. I love my job. I get to go to some wonderful places, but even when my destination isn't glamorous, some of the most inspiring things happen. I remember a specific time when I went to a city that I wasn't looking forward to visiting. It was a small rural community, and I thought, well, win some, lose some. At the event I attended there, I met a football coach from a nearby university. This guy was amazing. As we talked, he shared the most wonderful story about how he does things differently. He runs his football team as a human development and leadership program. Most coaches care only about winning and losing. This coach cares about the growth of his players first. If they win, he doesn't let it get to their heads. And if they lose, he uses it as a learning opportunity. He's the best part. It's having a huge impact on his players. Not only are they performing better as a team, but most of them are doing better in school and even having more success with personal relationships, like with their families, all thanks to their football coach. It was one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard, and I'm not even a sports fan. The general version of these stories may say more or less the same thing as the specific versions, but notice the depths of the emotion expressed in the more specific versions. Digging deeper brings back how you really felt. As you share your specific stories, your partner should take notes about the situation and circumstances you describe, and also the feeling they evoke. At the risk of beating a dead horse, these notes will be instrumental in identifying the material and emotion links between your stories. The goal is not simply for you to describe things you did, but to uncover who you are. Spend as much time as you need to tell each of your stories fully and to venture beyond your original list. As you share, you may remember experiences that you had forgotten. Tell those stories too. Remember, all the roads lead to why. There are no hard or fast rules to the stories you tell. Whether you are from your preparation or spontaneous memories, any story significant can help you solidify them or introduce new elements for consideration. The more stories you can share with your partner, the more data you will be able to cull from to find the golden thread. And the clearer the golden thread, the more accurate your why statement will be. Identifying your themes. The next step in your why discovery is to identify themes, the reoccurring ideas, words, phrases, and feelings that emerge from your stories. Your partner should take the lead during this part of the process. Remember, your partner has an objectivity that you don't have simply because you're too close to that patterns. While you're busy describing trees, your partner has a better view of the forest emerging. We see this all the time among people who want to learn their why. They think they can play both roles, storyteller and partner. They try to analyze their own stories and identify the themes themselves. We have yet to meet a single person, however, who has successfully done it. But we've met plenty who claim they did it, and then they showed us why statements that was about their business or their family or some goal they wanted to reach. When pressed, their statements or their passion for their statements fell apart. Even when Simon developed many of these techniques to discover his why, he asked someone to hear his stories and help find the golden thread for him. Again, your partner is focused on listening and recording and has the benefit of the objectivity. They are often hearing the stories for the first time, free of complicating factors such as personal history, insecurities, or ego. That's the reason the themes tend to be more obvious to them. Just as there are no wrong stories, there are no wrong themes. If something comes up more than once, write it down. There's no limit to the number of themes your stories may yield. You may end up with 8, 10, 15, or more. That's okay. The first step for you and your partner is getting all the themes down on paper. With your themes all in one place, take a couple of moments to look them over. In some cases, the themes will be in every story. However, your partner should be able to tie each theme back to at least 2 of the stories you told. Remember, an idea becomes a theme because it reoccurs in at least 2 seemingly unconnected stories. With all the themes listed, circle 1 or 2 that seem bigger than the rest. Those that jump off the page, the ones that inspire you or seem to define you and what you care about the most, is there are one you love more than the others. Ask your partner to weigh in on which of these themes seem more important, based on the stories you've told. Together, choose one theme that feels like your unique contribution, and one theme that captures the impact. Now you're ready to draft your why statement. Wait a second, you may be thinking, if those 2 themes are the only ones that will be used in the why statement, then why does my partner have to bother writing down all the other themes from my stories? And what if I really love themes that didn't end up in my why statement? Do I have to just throw them away? Don't worry. There's an important reason your partner writes down all your themes, and no, they don't get thrown away. As we'll see in a later chapter, these themes will become your hows. Draft your why. Once you identify your overarching themes, it's time to turn them into a draft of your why statement. As we noted in the previous chapter, we recommend that your first draft follow this format. This is the easiest way to ensure that your statement is simple, actionable, and focused on how you positively affect other people. With your overarching themes in the mind in this format in front of you, take a few minutes and write a first draft of your why statement. Your partner working separately should do the same. The value in the writing independently at first is that your partner may articulate your why differently than you do. Be it the perfect word or catchy turn of phrase, we find that having 2 slightly different takes on a why statement is actually very helpful. It's the same principle as taking a friend shopping with you. They might pick out a shirt that you wouldn't have looked at twice, but then you try it on and it's the greatest shirt ever. Spend about 5 minutes both working on your own statements. Only 5 minutes because there is a little value in overthinking at this stage. Then rejoin your partner and share your respective drafts. After considering both why statements, you may choose to go with one or the other or to combine them. Remember, the goal of the draft is not perfection. The goal is to get it to the ballpark, to come up with something that feels right. The actual words can and likely will change as you continue to spend time with your why. Reflect on it and most importantly, put it into action. This is what the final step is all about. Refine your why statement. After you have drafted, the final stage of the why discovery process is testing and refining your why statement. There are a few ways to do this. One fun way to validate your why statement or to get your ideas for how to tweak it is to do what we call the friends exercise. For this exercise, make a list of your closest friends, the people who are always there for you, the ones you can call at 2 a.m. if you need them and know they will pick up the phone. The ones who, if they call you at 2 a.m., you'd be there for them too. Then follow the instructions below. You can also download the Friends exercise as a free PDF. Friends exercise. The exercise works best if done in person, one friend at a time. Be sure to give your friends some context about the process you've gone through and tell them that you're asking them to help you on your journey. Keep your why to yourself for now. You don't want to influence your friends' upcoming responses. First, ask them, why are you friends with me? Don't be surprised if your pal looks at you as if you've grown 3 heads. It's not a question most friends ask each other, and it's harder to answer than we think. Friendships are rooted in feelings, and, as we know, feelings are difficult to put into words. For this exercise to work, you have to keep going even if both of you are a little uncomfortable. Ironically, asking a question that starts with why doesn't actually get us to the why. That's because the question why is an emotional question and it tends to elicit vague or reactive answers. In contrast, asking a what question elicits a more thoughtful and exact answer. Now ask the same question again, this time framed with what. What is it about me that made you choose to be friends with me? This time your buddy may say something like, I don't know, I care about you, I can trust you, we're into the same stuff, and we just get along really well. That's a logical answer, but of course those are the basic elements to almost any friendship. Continue to play the devil's advocate, always framing your why question with what, for example. If you want to ask why, instead ask, what is it about? Follow up with something like, great, you've just defined what it means to be a friend, but what is it about me in particular? Your friend will probably stammer and struggle for a minute, and maybe even come up with more attributes of any friend. As this goes on, you'll find it more and more tempting to let them off the hook. But keep at it. Yeah, but what specifically is it about me? Continue to push them beyond the rational answers. There are two ways you can tell There are two ways you can tell that you're getting where you want to go in this conversation. The first is when your friend goes quiet and starts staring at the floor ceiling, seemingly at a total loss of words. What's actually happening is they are connecting with their feelings for you and struggling to put them into words. If you attempt to fill the silence by throwing out another question or comment, you'll interrupt this very important process. Instead, let your friend sit in the silence and work through it. Let's say you're doing this with one of your friends. At some point, your friend will move on from generalities such as, we have the same sense of humor, to something specific such as, you really make me laugh, which is fun, but which also makes me realize that we see the world the same way. When I tell you what my boss said last week, and you make a joke about it, I not only laugh, but I also feel reassured that my boss is the crazy one, not me. And that brings up the second thing to watch for, which is a distinct shift in your friend's focus. At some point, they will stop describing you and seemingly start describing themselves. In the example above, when your friend says, I feel reassured that my boss is the crazy one, they are not talking about your personality, but about how you make them feel and the difference you make to them. And in other words, your friend is articulating your unique contribution to their life. And you've gone deep enough when we have an emotional response to whatever they say. You may get goosebumps or get choked up. That's because they have put into words the true value you have in their life. They have stated your why in their own words. And because the why exists in the part of the brain that controls emotions and not language, you have an emotional response. This is an important turning point. It's a wonderful way to see how you've been living your why without even realizing it. Chances are the themes and patterns that emerge from the friends exercise will be similar to, if not exactly like, those you and your partner uncovered during the why discovery process. But maybe your friend used a word or phrase in talking about you that you like better. If it feels right, go ahead and incorporate those words into your why statement. On the flip side, if the friends exercise brought different themes to light, that's something to consider too. Do any of those themes sit better with you than the ones you identified during the why discovery? If so, maybe you and your partner need to do a little more digging. In addition to the friends exercise, it can also be helpful to just let your why statement sit for a few days. Think of it as a cake. When you pull a cake out of the oven, you can't cut a slice and eat it right away. It's too hot and will fall apart. The cake needs to cool and set. Your why is the same. Give it some time to cool and set before you start to use it. Often the first draft of the why statement sounds a bit generic. While you are sitting with your why, try and unpack the words to find a language that is more authentic to you. The more completely captured your feelings, we sometimes play a little game with people and ask them if they like the words in their why statement enough to have them tattooed on their body. If the answer is no, then you haven't found the words you love and relate to yet. You really want to love the words, especially the words at your contribution. As you revise your why statement, refer back to your stories. This will help you ensure that any changes you make won't water down the accuracy of the statement. In the end, the goal of refining your why statement isn't to make it sound better, it's to make it feel better. How much time does it take to hone your why statement? We really can't say because it's different for everyone. Finding the perfect words for your why could take weeks or months. You may go through one iteration or a dozen. That's proven true even for members of the Start With Your Why team. Take David, for example. David's why statement used to read, to propel positive change so that people can live a more fulfilled life. This statement was in the ballpark, but the phrase fulfilled life didn't feel exactly right to David. It was too broad, and it seemed to him somewhat cliche. So he spent some time digging deeper. He had to answer the question, when I propel positive change, what am I actually doing? And while I'm at it, what does fulfilled life mean? He lived with this why statement, and I practiced saying it and implementing it. And at the time, making a little tweaks until this got to something that felt even more like himself than previous versions. The answer resulted in a revision of the original why statement to propel people forward so that they can make their mark on the world. When David realized, when he thought more deeply about his word choice, was that for him to propel people to live a fulfilled life meant helping them be a little better than they were the day before so they can have a greater positive impact on others. And that specific definition of fulfillment is spelled out clearly in the second version. That's why David's current why statement is stronger than the first, because it is both precise and more personal. Refining your why might make it more powerful for you, as it did for David, but it won't make it more valid or actionable. The words don't need to be perfect in order for us to begin to put our statement into practice. As a former Secretary of State, Colin Powell said, I can make a decision with 30% of the information. Anything more than 80% is too much. In fact, as you live with your why, it will become easier to find the perfect words because you'll be more conscious of your goals and how you're trying to reach it. So take some time to sit with your why statement, but don't sit for too long. The reason to find your why is so that you can act on it. We envision a world where everyone knows their why. Well, we know that reading a book is not the only way or even the ideal way for some to discover their why. As we are dedicated to having a golden circle on every desk, we've created multiple ways to find your why. Our team conducts live events and workshops, and we have resources available online. Learn more and find the tools inspired at. All right, that was chapter 3. Chapter 4, which we're going tomorrow, is why discovery for groups. Part 1, the tribe of approach. So we'll stand there. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate all of you. Okay. 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 Oops.